West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Would you really want Father Government to have the last say about what happens in schools? How about the village that sends your elementary-age child home with a comic book including graphic displays of sexual grooming?
I'm here to speak on behalf of our children, and I'm here to say that we need to reject the ideology of equity in our schools.
No mask mandates. My children will not come to school on Monday with a mask on. All right? That's not happening. And I will bring every single gun loaded and ready.
Wow. Well, good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight with those angry moms that you hear so much about, yelling and screaming about vaccines and children's books that don't do enough to rub the founding fathers' bellies or that dare to mention black or gay people, and who, just like that last parent you heard, got so incensed over mask wearing to protect against COVID, some of them threatened intimidation and violence towards school officials, which brings us to one of the greatest crises we face today, violence in our schools, as well as in our hospitals, grocery stores, places of worship, and just today at a cemetery during a funeral in Racine, Wisconsin. There is a lot of gun violence today in America. Too much, more than in any rich country on earth, and far too little being done about it. Which had me thinking, where are those angry moms now? Why aren't they protesting or running for school board and organized gangs to protect the kids from getting shot in school massacres? Isn't this a bigger child protection issue than Toni Morrison books? I mean, it's almost like their protests were really just political theater and not about protecting the kids at all. Because what could be more important when it comes to protecting children than at least trying to stop these mass shootings? I mean, the kids are sick of it. They are marching and walking out of school. The teachers are sick of it. So bring on the angry moms, right? Where did they go? Well, tonight, in this hour, America's fed up dad, President Joe Biden, will address the nation on rising gun violence in a televised address from the White House. The call for Congress to respond to make this time different saw the House Judiciary Committee holding a contentious debate over a package of new gun bills. The Protecting Our Kids Act raises the purchasing age for certain firearms and attempts to crack down on large capacity magazines. The debate, however, exposed the deep partisan standoff over guns, with one Republican lawmaker who attended the hearing via video conference denouncing the proposed changes while brandishing various guns that he owns. Congressman Eric Swalwell then posed this question to Republican colleagues blocking reforms in the wake of the most recent school shootings.
To my colleagues today who flew in town, came to work, got ready to argue, my question is, why did you come here at all? Why did you come here at all? If you're not here for the children, why don't you go to the funeral of the killer?
Joining me now is Congressman Eric Swalwell of California and David Hogg, co-founder of March for Our Lives and survivor of the 2018 Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland, Florida. Thank you both for being here. I'd love to know what the answer was to your question, Congressman Swalwell.
Joy and David, good evening. It was absolute silence and frankly shame, because they don't have an answer as to who they are showing up for. And my question was, if you're not there for the kids, if you don't want to raise the age to 21 on buying an assault weapon, if you don't want to have a Safe Storage Act, and if you don't believe in going after ghost guns, and you don't believe in banning high-capacity magazines, well, then you're coming down on the side of the killer, because only the killers of our kids benefit from legislation being blocked like that. And instead, they go after mental health. They say it's a family problem. They say this is really, about schools being soft targets. But when we put legislation up to address mental health, when we try and feed families, teach families, give jobs to families, and when we try and fund schools, they vote against it. It feels like it's a carnival shell game, and that they're really just there, to make sure that we're a country of unrestricted weaponry. So if David Hogg can keep the faith in this fight and believe that we can see change, then the least we can do in Congress is keep making that change. And that's why, I stay in the fight.
We had today, David Hogg, a gunman in Tulsa who had back issues, had surgery, get angry because he was still in pain, go back to the hospital where he was treated, actually go buy, on the way back to the hospital, go buy an AR-15, because you can just buy it on impulse, go into the hospital, shoot the doctor and 3 other people, and then kill himself. Like, he was able to buy the gun as he's thinking about doing the mass shooting. That's how easy it is to get that kind of a firearm. And we had a guy today, Billy Long of Missouri, blaming abortion for school shootings. So the problem is abortion. For you, do any of these arguments do they matter? Because it could be all, right? If it's mental health, then don't give people with mental health issues a gun. If the schools are soft targets, hell yeah, they're soft targets. Anyone with a gun can go in there and shoot them up. Does any of it get us away from talking about gun reform?
I think the reality is we need to have a change in our conversation here. For too long, this conversation has been you're either anti-gun or pro-gun. Our country is one thing. We need to be pro-peace. Our kids need to be safe in their schools and communities. Those parents that were advocating, even though I strongly disagree with them and think many of them are completely wrong, they at least claim to care about their kids. There were 0 kids that died this year in mass readings in their schools. It's not the word gay that's getting kids killed. It's people like the 19-year-old at my high school that waited until they were legally old enough to buy an AR-15, like the shooter in Buffalo, like the shooter in Texas as well, to go out and buy an AR-15 and shoot up their school or their community or a different community. They are criminal masterminds that have deep networks to the black market. They are barely adults. And what we need as Americans isn't just think of this as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans, and remember who we're fighting for. I met a young lady who was about 7 years old, named Eleanor, the other day in front of Senator Toomey's office. Her favorite thing to do is code. Her dad was a mailman and her mom was, I presume, a teacher. And we were protesting outside of Senator Toomey's office with her and teachers, just simply asking for a meeting, not acknowledging we don't agree on everything, but that we need action. All Americans agree that we need action, and we can't let these senators move on from this. And you know what Senator Toomey said to us it was the same thing that happened to John Cornyn just now in Texas with very similar young people that I was outside with, 10-year-olds, girls that wanted to be Marines, a young child that wanted to be the president one day. They all said, I don't have time to meet with you. They don't have time to meet with people like Eleanor. That's who we're fighting for here. And that's what frustrates me so much. And it's heartbreaking because these are our kids. They're our future.
Right. And it wouldn't have to do a whole lot. Let me play this ad. I thought about this ad today and asked my producers to get it. This is just a little piece of a Sandy Hook Promise ad that to me was the saddest thing ever and probably the most prescient ad ever. Take a look at this.
These scissors really come in handy in art class. These colored pencils, too. These new socks? They can be a real lifesaver. I finally got my own phone to stay in touch with my mom.
And And Congressman Swalwell, to David's point, I presume whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or you have a house full of guns or you don't ever touched a gun, you all feel shocked and saddened by the deaths of children and by children just being scared to go to school. This is something we all should share. And so I wonder, when you talk to Republicans about this issue, do they express that shock and sadness and a willingness to do anything, even just raise the age at which you can buy an AR-15? That's a simple thing that we could do.
They absolutely do, Joy, but not the Republicans in Congress. And I've seen this issue now evolve over 10 years in Congress. I was just being sworn in right after Sandy Hook. I was single. I had no kids. I was naive and thought we would do something about this in Congress. We did nothing. We didn't have a hearing for 7 years. Now, today, after Uvalde, I have a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 7-month-old. My 5-year-old is starting to ask questions. So we're seeing a new generation of young kids wondering about their own safety. A Moms Demand Action volunteer in my community named Alex Navarro told me last week that her 6-year-old daughter, after seeing the pictures of the 19 children in Texas, her 6-year-old daughter said, "Mom, what picture are you going to use for me?" And that's where kids are today, is they're thinking that they're not even safe in their classroom. And to your question, what do Republicans think? Well, this organization called 97%, it's a nonpartisan organization. They just put out a poll of only gun owners. 86% of gun owners want background checks. 76% of gun owners want safe storage laws, and 67% want red flag laws. So the Republicans, they're not even out of touch with mainstream America. They're out of touch with the people in their own party who own guns.
It is Friday, the 3rd of June of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the diner of life. Yeah, you can put that in your hopper. How are you doing? It's the end of the week and the beginning of the weekend, which means only one thing. A lot of news is going to come down the pike. Again, we thought we were going to get some respite from the Trump years. But no, the repugs are on a tear once again. Yeah, Ohio state Republicans are passing a law that if anyone suspects that the gender of a student athlete from grade school through university is not what they purport to be, that their genitals have to be inspected. I don't know. Is it by authorities? I don't know. Is it just anybody can inspect a kid's genitals? College kids too? They just have to comply? So it just makes me wonder, what is it about Ohio Republicans wanting to inspect your kids' genitals before a wrestling match? Why does Jim Jordan's legacy continue in Ohio? What is it about Ohio Republicans that say, oh, I want to be like Jim Jordan. Let's do what he did. God. Yeah, they're going to use trans kids as an excuse to be the child abusers. We all know that they are. I mean, who else would allow a proliferation of weapons of war? And I don't care if you think, not you out there, I'm talking rhetorically to all the gun nut maggots out there who attack me, saying an AR-15 and an AK-47 are not weapons of war. Except the commanding officers on military bases say they are. Anyway, they won't stop the proliferation, they being the repugs, the proliferation of those weapons that just turn little kids into mush. Jesus. Saying that, oh yeah, wait, an AR-15 is a weapon of choice to kill foxes before they get our chickens. I got to tell you, anybody using an AR-15 to shoot a fox that's going to attack chickens is getting a few chickens too, and it's turning them into chicken soup. And you can't even eat it because it's full of lead. What an idiot. Actually, the bullet will pass through, but I don't want any remnants of the blood. Okay? Jeez. So they're all literally up in arms because we just want some sensible gun safety measures. Oh, you can't lock up your guns in your house. This guy, I can't even... Stubby is brandishing guns on a Zoom call with the committee about these kids getting killed. And I made mention of this, and it is true. If that guy was on a Zoom call in any business in America, he would be arrested for making a terroristic threat. You're having a Zoom call where you're talking about gun safety on the job, and this guy is brandishing guns, and somebody says, I hope that's not loaded, and he retorts, I'm in my house, I can do what I want. So that's why all these kids find these guns and kill themselves and other people with them. Now, I'm not talking about the ones who wait until they're 18 so they can go buy a gun at the gun shop and then shoot everything up. Or you're in abject pain and you go to the gun shop, you buy a gun, and immediately you go to the hospital and kill the woman doctor who just would not take your pain away. Okay. Gives a whole new meaning about them being against background checks, huh? When someone's had back surgery and they're in abject pain, so they went and got a gun, a long rifle, by the way, that shoots massive amounts of bullets in a short amount of time at high velocity that turns bodies into mush. That's the weapon of choice to keep those foxes from getting into our hen house. Yeah, right. You know, we didn't use guns on the farm very much to get rid of vermin. I had a 32-ounce Louisville Slugger. I swung that thing when I was before I could even really swing it. You went out there and you chased the vermin away with your Louisville Slugger. You didn't waste bullets on some sort of vermin. Bullets are going to go into the ground and put lead in the ground, and then it's just so stupid. They're not killing foxes. They're not out there, and if they are out there hunting feral pigs with AK-47s, they're not hunting. They're culling, okay? And I got to tell you, professional hunters don't use an AK-47 to go out and get feral pigs. Jeez. We used to use a big old bow, compound bow. I don't know. Got to give the feral pig a sporting chance. No, they're not about killing animals. Well, actually they are, because there's certain humanoids that they consider to be nothing more than animals, so it's okay. Like Rittenhouse being lauded again for, he wasn't slow on the trigger, was he? No, he wasn't. I mean, after all, a Black Lives Matter protester came at him with a skateboard. That was enough of a threat for the kid to shoot him and a bunch of other people too. And because he's part of a white nationalist group who have at least adopted him, he is now lauded as a hero. And who remembers the skateboarder's name? We will one day. We will. Okay, well, it is Friday, and I meant to dive right into these articles that we've curated for you today. So why don't we go ahead and give you a rundown on what we have in store? Well, at the top, of course, that was Swalwell laying down the line that Republicans are out of touch with the people in their own party who own guns. I mean, what's wrong with a safety lock on the gun? What's wrong with putting your guns in a locked safe when you're not using them? I mean, if you got 18 guns and you want to carry one around, carry that one around. Don't leave 18 just laying around. I love these stories about in Walmart, one guy had his gun stolen from another guy, and so then the one guy who had his gun stolen ran to his car and got another gun than he had, and they both had a shootout, and some people died. collateral damage. But you know, you got to have a gun. All right. Well, on the rest of the menu, a newly revealed report puts to rest the right's conspiracy theories about Michael Flynn. And it's not a conspiracy theory to acknowledge the fact this guy was in a conspiracy with hostile foreign powers, Russia included, to undermine the United States of America because this guy didn't like the black guy that fired his ass because he's crazy as a loon. The jury said they are deadlocked in the We Build the Wall fraud trial after the judge allowed one jury who made politically biased statements against liberals to stay on the panel. Didn't see that one coming, did you? And the House Committee on Oversight and Reform accused Amazon of obstructing their investigation into the company's labor practices during severe weather events. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where, angered by a planned reform they worry will hurt their careers and the nation, members of the French diplomatic corps went on strike, the second such strike in over 20 years. And the United States and its allies vowed to hold Russia accountable for crimes committed by its forces that invaded Ukraine. If it was me, I'd say hold them accountable for Syria too, but that's just me. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And do become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio because we need the money. Thanks. And thank you to those of you who have been generous enough to send us what they might have spent on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month. Those funds have helped us pay our bills, and we are forever grateful for that generosity. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Thanks, Tom. Tom takes care of that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's, and you could get the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's itself if you happen to be there. Otherwise, look for the show notes and links to that diary on Twitter and other social media platforms. And you can find that generally at Justice Putnam on Twitter. Yeah. You can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found, and of course the deep archive of the Netroots Radio Library can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and it is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, of course, is by Aaron Blake out of the Washington Post. Among the many GOP efforts to counter-program the Russia investigation with thinly constructed conspiracy theories, one of the most persistent ones was the so-called unmasking of Michael Flynn. The idea was that Obama and his officials deliberately targeted Trump associates, and particularly Flynn, by requesting the disclosure of their names in intelligence reports before Trump took office, doing so for political purpose. This fed into long-running allegations of the government spying on Trump, who chose Flynn as his national security advisor. We knew before that this theory had fallen apart. We now know just how spectacularly. BuzzFeed News late on Tuesday revealed a previously top-secret Justice Department report that details the findings of a review ordered by William Barr. The report is a resounding rejection of the conspiracy theories which were seeded and fertilized throughout the Trump's 4 years in office by Trump allies and GOP members in Congress, and I would say continues to this very moment. Essentially, the idea was that the Obama officials might have sought the identity of Flynn in intelligence detailing his December 2016 calls with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, and then leaked details for political purposes. Flynn would later plead guilty to lying to the FBI about those calls, and there were valid questions early on about the Obama administration's use of unmasking. Really? I don't think so. But anyway, we'll go with it. The allegations almost always went beyond the known facts, and now the Justice Department affirms that the allegations went way beyond what actually happened, too. In his newly revealed report from September of 2020, then U.S. Attorney John Bash found, quote, no unmasking requests made before Election Day that sought the identity of an apparent associate of the Trump campaign, end quote. He said much the same about the transition period between Election Day of 2016 and Trump's inauguration in 2017. I examined whether any senior officials had obtained General Flynn's identity in connection with those communications through an unmasking request made during the transition, Bash wrote. The answer is no. According to the FBI, the Bureau did not disseminate an intelligence report discussing those communications and containing masked U.S. citizens' identity information for Flynn before Trump's inauguration, Bash wrote. For that reason, the public disclosure of the communications could not have resulted from an unmasking request. Bash said the FBI's version is consistent with my review of unmasking records, which did not reveal any unmasking requests corresponding to a report discussing those communications. Bash's big conclusion: I have not found evidence that senior U.S. officials unmasked the identities of U.S. persons contained in the intelligence reports for political purposes or other inappropriate reasons during the 2016 election period or the ensuing transition period. Flynn's contact with Kislyak was first revealed by the Washington Post in January 12th of 2017 by David Ignatius. In a telephone call, the two discussed sanctions during a conversation that might have run afoul of an unenforced federal law called the Logan Act. But speaking to the FBI later, Flynn denied having discussed sanctions. He pleaded guilty to that offense, but Barr's Justice Department later made the extraordinary decision to try to have the case dismissed. And then the lame duck President Trump pardoned Flynn. Larry Neumeister of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A jury said it was deadlocked yesterday, Thursday, in its deliberations of charges against a Colorado businessman accused of defrauding thousands of investors in a wall along the U.S. border hours after 11 jurors turned against one juror, accusing him of political bias and saying he'd labeled the rest of them dirty liberals. U.S. District Judge Annalisa Torres rejected a defense request to declare a mistrial and instead read a so-called Allen charge designed to spark productive deliberations in the trial of Timothy Shea. Jurors were then sent home. The original 4 defendants in the case included Steve Bannon, an advisor to Donald Trump, who was pardoned by Trump early last year. 2 others pleaded guilty to charges. The prosecution pertained to a Build the Wall campaign that raised about $25 million for a wall. Only a few miles were built. Prosecutors said Shea and other fund organizers promised investors that all donations would fund a wall. But Shea and others eventually siphoned away hundreds of thousands of dollars for themselves. Shea of Castle Rock, Colorado, owns an energy drink company, Winning Energy, whose cans have featured a cartoon superhero image of Trump and claims to contain 12 ounces of liberal tears. Earlier, 11 jurors said in a note to the judge that they were unanimously requesting that one juror be replaced by an alternate juror because that juror had shown anti-government bias and had accused all the others of being dirty liberals. In their lengthy note, the jurors told Torres that the juror had said things such as government witch hunt and accused the government of bringing the case in New York City because it knew people here vote differently. And the note said the juror added that the trial should have been tried in a southern state. They also accused the juror of saying, Tim Shea is a good man. He doesn't beat his wife. After the jurors requested that the juror be replaced, Torres, the judge, interviewed him in her robing room with lawyers from both sides present. She asked him several questions aimed at determining if he was biased. Simply, probably what she said is, "Can you be unbiased?" And the guy said, "Oh yeah, no problem." Wink, wink, wink. And defense attorney, the hearing, which was not open to the public, produced answers that caused the judge to order the jurors to resume deliberations. 90 minutes later, they returned a note that said, "We cannot agree on a unanimous verdict on any of the counts." Defense attorney John Marangolo had requested a mistrial hours earlier, contending that the jury had revealed so much about the deliberations in their note that they had violated instructions to keep their talks secret. After the deadlocked note, he resumed his request for a mistrial, and the judge refused it again. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Congressional Democrats are accusing Amazon of obstructing their investigation into the company's labor practices during severe weather events. Members of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform have sent a letter to Amazon CEO Andy Jassy, saying the company has failed to produce materials requested more than 2 months ago. I'm just a little curious how this is constructed, this article here. Congressional Democrats are specified as being the members of Congress, yet any other time when they're trying to hide the fact that Republicans have been behind the most onerous legislation in years, they always say it's Congress. Like we were involved in it too. Well, there are Republican members on this committee. Whether they signed the letter or not is immaterial. It came from the committee, not just Democratic members of the committee. Now I understand constructing it this way could note that Republicans did not sign on, but let's continue. The committee, which launched the investigation in late March, gave the Seattle-based e-commerce company a list of materials to hand over by mid-April. But the company still has not produced any of the key categories of documents identified by the committee staff, let alone the full set of materials the committee requested in March, said the letter signed by committee chairwoman Representative Carolyn B. Maloney. The letter was also signed by, and I love this, by progressive reps Cori Bush, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Yeah, got to make that in there, right? Okay. Unfortunately, Amazon has failed to meaningfully comply with the committee's requests, obstructing the committee's investigation, they wrote in the letter made public yesterday, Thursday, adding that the company has only produced an incomplete set of policies and procedures. Kelly Nantel, an Amazon spokesperson, said the company was surprised to receive the letter. She said Amazon began providing materials to the committee 2 weeks after receiving the initial request and has produced more than 1,500 pages of information, just not the information that was requested. The company's labor practices and policies during extreme weather events has been under increased scrutiny since the December collapse of a company warehouse in Edwardsville, Illinois, where 6 people died and another was critically injured in a tornado strike. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration wrapped up its own probe into the incident last month, concluding that Amazon met minimal federal safety requirements for storm sheltering. But regulators also found safety risks and called on the company to improve its procedures. The letter said the company had not produced any internal communications related to the Edwardsville tornado to the committee, which is doing its own investigation into the incident. The committee is also seeking documents showing how Amazon managed its workforce during other natural disasters, including wildfires in California in 2018. Let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
Yeah, this is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, Horror Me Too. Examining humankind's increasingly tenuous place in the natural order is becoming a hallmark of director Alex Garland. Now his new Men joins the enigmatic Ex Machina and Annihilation in his explorations, this time with a creative look at what's come to be called toxic masculinity. To tell the story, there are just 2 main actors. One is the talented Jessie Buckley, who plays Harper Marlowe, an urban professional woman seeking the solace of the English countryside after the apparent suicide of her husband, the backstory on which we get in flashback. The male actor is an underappreciated Rory Kinnear, who plays the landlord of her rental cottage, the constable, the vicar, and a mysterious naked stalker. In other words, the men, except for the dead husband, who figures prominently in the conclusion. All these characters are made up just enough for it to take merely a moment to discover that they're all the same guy. The male toxicity almost oozes. The landlord is creepy, passive-aggressive, and not subtle. The constable a step above indifferent. And then there's the vicar, whose initial comforting sympathies quickly give way to a demeanor slyly encapsulating religion's age-old problems with women. And not just Christianity's. Inside the vicar's church are symbols, Christian and pagan, male and female, including the ancient fertility symbol Sheila Nagig. The body horror conclusion portrays a profoundly female act, from whence the men emerge in an order which leaves a seed of doubt. As intellectual as it is visceral, men may have a hard time connecting at the box office, but what its message lacks in profundity at this point in time is more than made up for by its provocative approach. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Don't you wish your life came with a warning app?
Stop. That dog does not want to be petted.
Just a little heads up before something bad happens.
Move your coffee cup away from your computer.
Oh, no.
So you can have more control.
Stop. You're texting your boss by mistake.
Uh-oh. Well, life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome, but prediabetes does. With early diagnosis and a few healthy changes like managing your weight, getting active, stopping smoking, and eating healthier, you can stop prediabetes before it leads to type 2 diabetes. It's easy to learn your risk. Take the 1-minute test today at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Warning. The cap is loose on that ketchup.
Ugh. Don't wait. You have the power to change the outcome. Visit doihaveprediabetes.org today. That's doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its prediabetes awareness partners.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Last July, several GOP senators combined their 5-watt intellects to charge that inflation was rising because of, quote, insane tax and spending spree of President Biden and the Democrats. Never mind that the insane spending is for such sensible, productive, and enormously popular national needs as child care and jobless benefits. Mitch McConnell's rabidly partisan flock saw the chance to politicize the public's legitimate worries about rising prices. You poor consumers are made to pay more for basics, they squawked, because of Socialist Joe's investment in grassroots people. Follow the ricocheting pinball of the GOP's logic. 1, they say that helping hard-hit families induces them to refuse to go to work. 2, this creates blockages in the global supply chain. 3, this causes shortages of everything. 4, this forces corporate bosses to raise all prices, which 5, slams the middle class and poor, so 6, lazy workers cause inflation. Whoa! Rube Goldberg couldn't have dreamed up a more fantastical diagram to deflect attention from what's really happening, namely that instead of an inflation problem, we have a corporate greed problem. Of course, the greedmeisters insist that their pursuit of excess corporate profits has not driven any price surges. In our economy of free market competition, they snap, Prices are established by the law of supply and demand. It's the magic of the marketplace, they explain. But magicians don't do magic, they perform illusions. And the illusion of free market competition implodes when it hits the reality that our economy doesn't remotely resemble a competitive marketplace. This is Jim Hightower saying, for some 40 years, corporate-directed government policies have been transforming America into monopoly nation, letting the few gouge the many. That's where inflation comes from.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. We are joined again today by a very special guest, Justice Paula Nakayama, an Associate Justice on the Hawaii Supreme Court. Justice Nakayama, what is it like to be one of the very first women to serve on the Hawaii Supreme Court, and one of the very few Asian American women serving as a state Supreme Court justice?
No matter what your gender is, being on the Supreme Court is an honor and a privilege. Now, throughout my time on the bench, I have experienced incidents of discrimination that are dismaying. For instance, when I was at a justice's reception, someone handed me his dirty dishes because he assumed I was waiting help. Or when I was going through customs and was asked what my occupation was, and I responded I was a judge, the man asked if I judged horses or flowers. So I think in some respects, it was more difficult for men to accept me as a judge than which in turn made it a little bit difficult for me. I hope that has changed over the years. Nevertheless, it's still a wonderful experience and extremely rewarding.
Thank you very much for joining us again today, Justice Nakayama. That's all for today's podcast.
We all are hurting. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. That was the beginning of a headline of a recent Associated Press story about the killings at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, where, on May 24th, an 18-year-old gunman shot dead 19 children and 2 teachers. The headline continued, "Mourners say goodbye to Uvalde teacher, husband." The story was about the funeral of Irma Garcia, who was completing her 23rd year as an elementary school teacher. Ms. Garcia and her husband Joe had 4 children, a 7th grader, a high schooler, a college student, and a Marine. 2 days after the shooting, after leaving flowers at his wife's memorial, Joe collapsed and died, apparently of a heart attack. June 28th would have been their 25th wedding anniversary. The Archbishop who spoke at their funeral said of Irma Garcia and the attack in her classroom, quote, "You did what you would have done with your own children. You took care of them until your final breath." Words are insufficient to express our heartbreak at the loss of lives at Robb Elementary. And so we conclude this Civil Liberties Minute with these moments of silence.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day that the International Lady Garment Workers Union was formed. 11 delegates attended the founding meeting. They represented the major garment-making cities of the East Coast. Most of the membership of these unions were Jewish immigrant women. Many were socialists, or had been involved with trade unions in their home countries before making their move to the United States. They brought this union culture with them to the garment industry. Herman Grossman was elected the first president of the union. Men held all of the leadership positions of the ILGWU during its early years. This opened the union to criticism that the leadership did not represent the membership. Despite this criticism, the union grew quickly. Only 4 locals joined the ILGWU at its first meeting, but soon locals were chartered beyond the East Coast in cities such as Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, and San Francisco. From its inception, the ILGWU became a leading advocate for what is known as social unionism. This type of unionism looks beyond workplace issues to a broader agenda of social welfare. This included holding labor history classes, English language classes, and performance art. In 1913, the union opened a health center for its members in New York City. The ILGWU became an important progressive force in the labor movement. In 1975, they launched the Look for the Union Label ad campaign, including this commercial from 1981.
For the union label, when you are buying a coat, dress, or blouse.
As more and more garment work moved out of the United States, membership fell. In 1995, the ILGWU joined with the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union to form Unite. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all night hawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees Fahrenheit, but only going up to about 70 to 72, a precipitous decline in temperature from what it was yesterday, when we were above 87 yesterday during the most warm period. And then it lingered. But that's okay, because we are having copious amounts of rain falling from the sky and watering the garden that I am way behind on in terms of getting vegetables into the ground. Got to get them out of the greenhouse and into the ground. Just been a little deficient in getting that done, but I will. Well, it looks like we'll be cloudy early, then off and on rain showers later on this morning. And winds will be out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and cloudy with an occasional rain shower overnight. Winds will be light and variable. Rain today and overnight will bring with it a 1/4 inch of rain, and then tomorrow, highs in the mid-60s. Rain showers in the morning, evolving to a more steady rain in the afternoon. Winds will be light and variable, and water from the sky should be accumulating to over a 1/2 inch. And then on Sunday, we're looking at another 1/4 inch of rain, and we'll see what happens on Monday. But that's a good drop, and we need it. Looks like grass pollen is very high right outside the window in Rogue River itself, and the air quality index for the Rogue River Valley region remains in the good range at 26 parts per million. And that daytime UV index also remains very high at level 8, so take care. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.85 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 87%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London continues with their Platinum Jubilee, but I guess the Queen's not going to be making it today. She felt a little, well, look, she's 90-something, isn't she? I mean, come on, the tires are out. I know. I'm taking care of an almost 90-year-old gal. Anyway, looks like they're going to be 71 degrees and fair. Paris is 68 with rain showers. Rome is 88 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 73 and sunny, which is bad if you're wanting to stay away from the bombers. Kabul is 68 and clear. Hong Kong is 83 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 65 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 54 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 56 degrees and cloudy. And New York is 70 degrees Fahrenheit and mostly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Elaine Ganley of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Members of the French diplomatic corps dropped their traditional reserve yesterday, Thursday, to go on a rare strike. Angered by a planned reform they worry will hurt their careers and France's standing in the world. It was the second such strike in over 20 years. About 100 diplomats dropped their veil of invisibility that often defines their work to demonstrate in full view of the imposing Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs, the home base for the Foreign Service. In overseas posts ranging from Tokyo to the Middle East and Washington, numerous diplomats, including some ambassadors, honored the day-long strike. They want Macron to scrap a plan to merge career diplomats with a larger body of civil servants starting in January, or at least hold a dialogue, because that's what diplomats do. They hold dialogues. The plan, announced by Macron in an April decree, will reportedly affect about 800 diplomats. Opponents claim that that is just the beginning. We risk the disappearance of our professional diplomacy, a group of 500 diplomats wrote in a commentary published last week in Le Monde. Today, diplomatic agents are convinced it is the very existence of the ministry that is now being put into question. The planned change comes amid the war in Ukraine and complex negotiations over Iran's nuclear program, and while France holds the European Union's rotating presidency. Newly appointed Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna, herself a career diplomat, has not commented. However, she will meet on Tuesday with unions and representatives of the protest movement for an initial listening session, the ministry said. The government reform is meant to modernize and diversify France's diplomatic corps, created in the 16th century, and to bring down the walls of what some in the government see as an elite institution turned in on itself. It will put diplomats into a large pool from all branches of public service, encouraging switches to other ministries and forcing personnel to compete with outsiders for prized diplomatic posts. Diplomats contend their job requires specialization and expertise acquired over years in posts around the world and has no room for amateurs. Dominique de Villepin, a former prime minister and foreign minister known for an eloquent 2003 speech at the United Nations in which he declared French opposition to the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq, led the pending reform in a tweet last month a historic fault. For France, the loss of diplomats' separate status in the civil service means a loss of independence, a loss of competence, a loss of memory that will weigh heavily on the years ahead, Villepin tweeted.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Edith M. Lederer of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The United States and its allies vowed to hold Russia accountable for crimes committed by its forces that invaded Ukraine on February 24th and gave strong support to investigations by the International Criminal Court, the United Nations, and other bodies. U.S. Undersecretary of State Uzra Zaya told the UN Security Council meeting on strengthening accountability and justice for serious violations of international law. Zaya said the United States is working with its allies to support a broad range of international investigations into atrocities in Ukraine, and she said the Biden administration has a message for Russia's political and military leaders. The world is watching you. You will be held accountable. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. But do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.